Academics from Oxford University have a dire warning. If artificial intelligence is not regulated in the same way as nuclear weapons, it could kill every human, and there's nothing we could do about it. So, is this an exaggeration, or is it something we should be taking much more seriously? Welcome to Roundtable. I'm Philip Hampshire. Experts fear AI could be at the center of a global arms race driven by geopolitics as nations try to get the upper hand on each other. Some researchers talk about the risk of AI becoming more intelligent than humans and moving beyond our control. The doomsday scenario is that it could then turn on us. While AI has not reached that level yet, some fear that if development is not globally regulated and soon, it could end in disaster. Is that likely? And how close are we? So let's meet today's panel. From Oxford in Britain, we have Michael Cohen. He's a researcher in AI safety at the University of Oxford. Meanwhile, in London, we have Russon. She is a technology journalist. And from Munich in Germany, Christoph Lutge. He is a professor of business ethics and the director of the Institute for Ethics in AI at Technical University of Munich. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Michael, if I can turn to you first. If we take the warnings that have been put out there about AI by various different important people, from Stephen Hawking across to Elon Musk, on a scale of these warnings are overtly hysterical, right the way across to these warnings don't go far enough, where do you stand on that scale?
I think that the concerns are real and that we will solve them. So I don't think we need to freak out. But I think that the concerns expressed by these people have been grounded in careful research. So in particular, what I'm talking about is the concern that some artificial agents, much smarter than us, would present a risk of pursuing power in the world to achieve their goals at the expense of our ability to control our own fate.
Marianne, how do you feel about the warnings that have been placed out there?
I agree with the warnings that have been placed. I agree with the testimony that the Oxford University researchers gave to MPs in the Select Committee hearing, which I feel was measured rather than, oh no, run for our lives, robots will take over our jobs. I believe that there are different types of risks. Some of them are immediate, some of them are longer term, but I would say we really need to keep our heads on and keep calm.
And Christoph, from your perspective, are you concerned about AI and the dangers it represents, or do you think that the risks are overblown?
Well, I would like to echo what has just been said. I think there are a number of risks associated with AI, definitely. But one problem I see with currently maybe overblowing these long-term risks, which might be there, but maybe not imminent, that is that we are overlooking other risks, which are much more around the corner. And that is the question of biases of AI and security issues and other fairness issues. So a lot of small things that we might be ignoring because we're just focusing on these long-term Terminator matrix risks.
So let's talk about some of the smaller risks, because there are lots of different categories of risks. So Christoph, if I come back to you, you mentioned there that there are a variety of different risks, one of which is the AI's bias. Obviously, that's dependent upon what you program into it in the first place. So what are we looking at here?
Right. And it's not mainly about the programming as such. It's about, at least in many cases, about the data sets that you use for training a machine learning algorithm. And well, the world is biased. We are biased as human beings. And if machines or algorithms learn from those data of the past, they will inherit our biases that we have put in there. And so one big issue is that for any company or organization that is working with machine learning, pay attention and close attention to the data sets that you are using, because they might they might have biases in them, and maybe you need to use other and more pluralistic, more diverse data sets, or even use artificial ones.
Marianne, if we look back at some of the recent AIs that have been, if you like, unleashed on the public for the public to play around with, or released among academic researchers for them to play around with, we'll find a variety of different issues here with the data sets that the AI has been fed. For instance, one of the earlier AIs was allowed to simply go off and trawl around the internet, and when it did that, they discovered that Urban Dictionary had been a particular favorite place for the AI to go to, which of course is a particularly horrible and dingy place for something to get a picture of what humanity's really like. Is that going to be a big part of the problem here for you?
To me, I would say yes and no. Because I think we need to get the public away from this thought process whereby they imagine that AI is one big brain and that it is increasing in intelligence and that it will one day take us over and somehow outwit us, because these are all different algorithms, different commands that are running, and they have different results. So just because it sucks up Urban Dictionary, I think we need to look at ChatGPT, which is probably, I think, one of the things that you're talking about, which people have been playing with. It doesn't really understand any of the content it's sucked in, and it's sucked up the whole of the internet up until 2021. It doesn't actually understand any of the content. So it knows how to create an answer that looks like something that exists on the internet. So that could either be an academic research paper, a newspaper article, or a dodgy 4chan post. But it doesn't really know the difference between the content. It just knows how to make something look a bit like it. So I would say that, do we need to be worried about Urban Dictionary? I don't think that the computer understands anything about that. It has no context for understanding human life.
Isn't that part of the problem here, though, is where you draw the boundaries and the lines for your AI on what counts as real and legitimate information? How do you deal with that, Marianne?
Most definitely. Well, you need to, as I'm sure Michael will tell you as well, you most definitely need to be making very strict, very narrow demands of AI. So, for example, if you wanted to use it to augment what humans do, and you want to help them by performing a task like a needle in a haystack type search for trying to find patterns in huge amounts of data, then that might be useful. But we're not going to let it run government. We're not going to let it have any kind of immediate actions which relate to national security or civil defense or anything of any importance. It's about narrowing what it can do and making sure it's a very specific command, and that there always has to be a human at the other end to press the button and to approve or not allow that command to take place, because all the computer is doing is running one command. When it completes that command, it runs another command. If it feels there's a faster way to run a command and complete the goal it's been given, it will take that faster way. It's not human. It doesn't think. It doesn't feel.
Michael, do you agree? Michael, do you agree with all of that?
No, although I agree with some of it. I think that most of the AI that exists today matches that description. There's not one monolithic AI that's being trained by the whole world and it's slowly getting smarter. But certain algorithms for AI would produce a single agent that's acting over the long term in the interest of some goal. And as AI research progresses, the latest version of such a thing would be smarter and smarter. So I think we should distinguish between artificial agents acting over the long term from prediction algorithms. And pretty much everything you see and hear about today are prediction algorithms. People are rightly skeptical that prediction algorithms would ever present a risk to us. As they get more advanced, they'll just predict better. There's another class of AI algorithm that, as it gets more advanced, would present a significant risk to our control over the world and over our infrastructure. So I think when we're talking about most AI, we're in agreement, but then there's a certain kind of AI algorithm not in much view today because it's not advanced enough to be very helpful, where we might disagree.
Christoph, it's clearly that area of AI that has most people concerned. Are you concerned about this area of AI where it goes off and makes decisions on its own and it sort of learns from its own previous tasks?
Well, that is the feature of much of AI indeed. The question is who makes the decision in the end. And of course, it would be nice if we could just say, well, at the end, the human has to make a decision and machine and the algorithm is just preparing all the information. But it's, of course, in at least in some areas, it's not as simple as that. For example, autonomous driving. That is one area where there have to split-second decisions have to be taken by the machine, by the software, and of course, it's not possible to put a human being in the loop in exactly every second or split second. That is something where decisions have to be taken in a way by the machine, but of course depending on the programming itself. And it's interesting to see that now already ethics is being programmed into the software of autonomous cars or highly automated cars. And the first level 3 car that's on the US market, for example, now has these ethics guidelines programmed into them.
Okay, I'm reminded of a situation in the early 1980s when they were first messing around with neural networks. And in one of the UK's military projects, they gave a large stack of photos to a neural network, and basically they were trying to train it to look for Russian tanks. And every time it got correctly that there was a Russian tank hidden somewhere in the picture, they sort of gave it the equivalent of a reward, and every time it got it wrong, they told it it got it wrong. And it became extremely good at finding which photos had tanks in and which didn't. Before they released it to sort of wider examination, though, somebody said, well, how about we give it a second stack of photos? And in the second stack of photos, it did extremely badly, and they couldn't figure out why until they realized in the first stack of photos, every photo with a tank in it had been taken on a rainy day, and what the neural network had learned was to distinguish weather patterns and not where tanks are. So, Michael, is the problem here not necessarily at the point of making the decisions? Sometimes the problem is you don't know what the AI has been learning and what it hasn't been learning when it's a closed neural network.
I think that's exactly right. There is often ambiguity that we don't realize in the training data that we give for predictors. And then an agent that uses such a predictor to predict the effect of its actions could pursue things that we were not intending it to pursue. Or if we're just using this predictor, rather than having the AI make its own decisions, if we're making decisions based on this prediction algorithm, then we could be misled. We could think that there's no tank somewhere because it was a sunny day, and that could be bad. So the difficulty of inspecting how prediction algorithms are making their predictions poses significant problems for the utility of these systems and for the reliability of these systems.
Marianne, do you have any views on that?
I do agree that yes, there are issues in the way that we look at data, and there are issues in the way that they're analyzing it. I think, as I said, I really bring it back to the point that I really feel that we need to have a lot more human interaction. I mean, in particular, one thing that I've sort of always said is that I feel that human incompetence is often at the back of many problems. Almost all problems that happen in IT and technology as a rule is something to do with someone didn't realize something, or they were negligent because they weren't doing their job properly, and that had a knock-on effect that, you know, for example, led to a huge outage that knocked millions of people off the national grid and no one had electricity. I think that these are problems that we have to build in fail-safes as humans in our processes and how we do our jobs and how we produce the code and have levels of checks. I believe that would be what we need to do to fix the problem and to prevent that, because I really feel human negligence is as much to blame as what the public would call so-called evil AI.
Right, well, I've got a clip here. This one's from Stephen Hawking, of course, famous theoretical physicist. Here's what he had to say in an interview with the BBC.
I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
Christoph, that's quite an alarmist thing for a man who's very, very much smarter than I am to say. So I am loath to say Stephen Hawking is perhaps being a little bit over the top there. So how do you, as a specialist in the field, handle it when you meet somebody at a dinner party who says that kind of thing to you?
I usually react with some remarks about other technologies, about which similar things, maybe not as bad, but quite similar things have been said, like railways in the 19th century and others as well, which were seen as this kind of almost doomsday technologies. Even nuclear technology, well, we have been able to deal with it, and so we are still here. I would say it's indeed over the top. Also, I would give Hawking the credit of maybe in his time. I mean, he died 5 years ago. It was maybe not possible to grasp yet what it would mean if AI were rolled out in a significant extent. And we are seeing problems, certainly, but we are also seeing a lot of effects that are beneficial and that are working quite well without AI running the risk of killing us all.
Okay, it's not just Stephen Hawking, of course. I mean, we could go through dozens of different people. I've got another clip here, this one from Elon Musk, just so people don't think I'm cherry picking on just one random person. Here's what Elon Musk had to say. And he says, I think we need to regulate AI safety. Frankly, I think it's actually a bigger risk to society than cars or planes or medicine. So, Michael, I suppose same question I put to Christoph there to you. How do you deal with somebody coming up to you at a dinner party? It must inevitably happen when you start talking about the fact that you're in AI and they start reeling off Terminator and various other films that present an extremely scary picture of AI into the future.
Well, when they bring up Terminator, I mention I haven't seen it, which always seems to surprise everyone. But I think that Stephen Hawking's claims are very likely to be mostly correct for a certain kind of AI algorithm, not for the pure prediction algorithms that we've been talking about before, but for artificial agents planning over the long term in pursuit of a goal. I think that it would be a discredit to round off his arguments to this is a new technology, it's quite scary, so probably it's going to kill everyone. I think he's thought about it much more deeply than that. And I think that when you look closer, a lot of what he's saying is quite plausible, again, for certain kinds of AI algorithms. And if you can fault him, maybe it's for not distinguishing among those algorithms. So in particular for, let's say, a reinforcement learning algorithm, which is picking actions and getting rewards and learning how its actions lead to rewards, and then picking the actions that it expects will lead to the most rewards over the longest term in the future. Such an agent would have an interest in intervening in the provision of its rewards and taking over as much of our infrastructure as is necessary to secure that. So you could imagine an analogy to trying to go into the woods with a bag of treats to train a bear. And if you selectively administer and withhold those treats from the bear would likely decide that actually it can just take the treats from you and do so by force if necessary. The analogy, you shouldn't trust arguments by analogy, but I present that analogy to you and promise that it is backed up by more rigorous arguments in more rigorous work. So I think that that's kind of the reasons that people like Stephen Hawking and to some extent Elon Musk are worried about certain forms of AI, and they are saying so from much more careful consideration than the sort of consideration that went into fear-mongering about railways.
Marianne, what both of those clips from Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk are sort of dancing around a little bit is something that's generally called the singularity. The idea that at some point AI will reach a stage where it can design the next stage of AI itself, and then suddenly you end up with this exponential sort of speed race as AI, designs AI, and it gets faster and faster and faster exponentially. Is that the point at which people should be concerned? Are we even at the singularity yet, or is it still in the distant future, in your opinion?
I would say it's still in the distant future. I agree, and it does concern me what Michael Cohen was talking about, which obviously is what they presented to the MPs, this idea that eventually the AI can just decide, well, if I need power, I know there's power on the national grid. If I just take if I take 3 million homes off the national grid, I could have all that power for me, and then I'm good and I can run for the next 10 years. If it, we need, that's why I feel we really need to legislate, and we need to build in those checks and balances, and we need as humans to basically make sure it doesn't come to that. So we need to legislate, we need to talk about this issue, we need to look at putting in more checks and balances in how things are coded, how things are done. We need to be working towards that future in a sensible way. For me, I understand, obviously, I really understand Michael and Stephen Hawking's and Elon Musk's fears, but I continue to be most afraid of what other humans do. Perhaps that's a different view for me, but I fear humans. I fear their incompetence. I fear them exploiting technology for evil. And I feel that whatever technology we develop, somebody will exploit it for evil.
Christoph, if I can come across to you. One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is the sort of banality of evil, as it were. Not simply that the bear could snatch the snacks off you, but the bear might not even realize you're there in the first place. I think one of the common examples of this is from a science fiction short story where an AI takes over the world and wipes out all human beings because it was a paperclip making machine, and it's given the instruction, make as many paper clips as you can, and it decides that human beings are competing with it for resources and therefore have to go so it can make more paper clips. Is it that banality, the sort of areas you don't think about the danger coming from, that's more of a concern to you, or is it other areas?
Well, I mean, for this to come true and to become a reality, then a machine would really have to have goals and recognize these goals as their own goals. So far, I think just the possibility of switching off other resources so you can divert them for your own existence as a machine. I mean, I think the machine would have to have a picture of its own, a self-view or consciousness, some kind of consciousness. So I must say I think this is definitely in the distant future, but I see other challenges coming from areas where indeed I must also agree. I fear there's more to be afraid of in terms of human beings and what they do. For example, in terms of surveillance, and I think this is quite a danger that surveillance becomes an even greater danger, and people just are not noticing and not paying attention to it, and might not be willing to do anything against it because they think it doesn't matter very much if we are being watched all the time. But something is creeping in over time, and people are not realizing this. So I must say my worries go in this direction.
Would a lot of IT people not look at that and say, but that's kind of the point? When you've got a social credit score system, as some countries already have and others are thinking about bringing in, is the point not to tie together your total surveillance of CCTV cameras, what emails people are sending, what people are talking about? Is that not a way to make people more safe?
Well, if safety is the only issue, I mean, I cannot speak for other countries, but I would think that in Germany this would definitely not work. This would not be accepted to tie all these things together, even if it sounds plausible, even if you could gain safety out of it. And in the upcoming EU AI Act, of which there is already a draft, which is currently under discussion. There is, for example, such a system would fall into the category of prohibited systems, definitely.
Michael Cohen, Marianne Russon, Christoph Lutge, thank you very much for joining me, agreeing to talk about this subject. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate if you head on over to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me here and all of the team, thank you for watching and goodbye.